call the meeting to order.
Mr. Vieira?
Here.
Dr. Vogel will be absent this evening. Mrs. Wittes?
Here.
Dr. Selly?
Here.
Mr. Dangler?
Here.
And I hereby certify that this meeting has been published in the newspapers in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act and posted as required by law.
Item number 1, green spot. Robert Perugino.
I'd like to ask the Green Spot folks to join as well. So good evening, Roberto Ferragino from the Office of Economic and Community Development. I'm here to discuss the Green Spot company and services with you folks. Green Spot is a privately held organization based in Jersey City, New Jersey. They've been in business for approximately 6 years, and they currently have several programs with different municipalities throughout the state of New Jersey, providing EV stations that charge electronic vehicles, as well as other services. Tonight we're here to discuss specifically the electronic vehicle charging stations service that they provide. They have a program in place currently with Asbury Park. They're in discussions with Red Bank. They're in the process with the town of Metuchen. They're existing as well as Asbury in the town of Jersey City and other municipalities, both in and out of the state. We've met with them several times. They install turnkey electronic charging stations within municipal parking lots, garages, as well as municipal curbside, strategically located where the municipalities decide in conjunction with their recommendations. They also collaborate with the local community when needed. So I'd like to hand it over to them, but before I do, I'd like to also mention that, as we move forward, the past several years, the data has shown that the amount of electronic vehicles that have been purchased in the United States has increased each year. The amount of types of vehicles that offer EV has also increased. So the number of models have increased, the number of purchasers has increased year over year. That's estimated to continue. So although the amount of electronic vehicles is minimal relative to the overall amount of vehicles in the United States, it's a trend that tends to not be a trend. It's going to be a long-term outcome of more electronic vehicles each and every year, which ties into the environmental element with noise concerns, pollution concerns, greenhouse gas emissions, reduction by implementing EV stations as well. A program such as this would also assist the municipality of Long Branch, the city, through Sustainable Jersey, because we can tie it into our partnership with Sustainable Jersey and our certification. And then, again, there's the overall environmental element as well. It gives incentives to individuals who may have electronic vehicles who are shopping in local towns that have these stations, such as Asbury Park, to potentially visit Long Branch, where they can charge their vehicle and go to lunch, go to dinner, shop, etc., go to the beach, what have you. So with that, that's the high-level recap. I'll hand it over to the folks from Green Spot to discuss with you in more detail of what this company offers and a potential partnership with the City of Long Branch. Thank you.
Thanks, Robert, and thanks for having us here. We've been around, like Robert mentioned, for almost 6 years, and we're excited to be in Long Branch because right now what we're seeing in terms of electric vehicle adoption throughout the U.S. and particularly New Jersey is like never before. And kind of to take a step back, what we do at Green Spot is we partner with the public sector, with municipalities, enter in public-private partnerships, and develop and install networks of electric vehicle charging stations with no taxpayer dollars spent. And what does that mean? Meaning, what's the catch, really? It means that we'll come in, all we ask for really is parking spots that are strategically located within the city, and we'll install charging stations, go through the whole process, starting from the site feasibility, installation, management, and operation. And then over time, we'll optimize the program, make sure that it's being utilized, make sure that the public is engaged, and ultimately expand it so that it's a network of stations that not only is in Long Branch, but is in the whole town and the whole region. So we started in Asbury Park, and I think a natural next step is Long Branch, of course. And the whole point is looking at charging, and not just the fact that someone will have their charging station and be able to plug in their own personal vehicle, but having publicly accessible station so that different types of vehicles can charge. So we know that about 80% of charging will be at home or at your workplace. And so we're looking at that 20% of publicly accessible charging. Who's going to use it? It's going to be fleets, taxis, rideshare, municipal fleets, and so forth. And it'll also be those who are coming to visit. And on top of that, having publicly accessible charging is essential because even psychologically, you know you have charging stations at home, but you want to know that when you are driving around the city, when you are running errands, that you have that buffer. Even if they are not utilized for that specific use case, having them in public locations is essential and critical to really get that adoption of the vehicles for those who will have charging at home. So we know that public is important, and that's what we're focusing on. So right now, the initial steps and what we're hoping to do is install a few charging stations in select locations. I think the timing is great. The governor just last Friday signed his bill. In New Jersey right now, there's about 30,000 electric vehicles on the road. The goal, and the governor's goal, is by 2025 to have 330,000 on the road. That's like 10x, which is a lot. So we believe that the steps now are proactive and not reactive, right? It's still the first phase, but it's setting a message, right? Putting the initial stations in there, and then over time expanding as demand grows. And that's what we're really trying to do. Like I mentioned, it's at no cost. It's for the public benefit, and I think we've done a lot of work in the state of New Jersey, and there's a lot of precedent that has been set. So we're really trying to just get it going and get the first pilot location. Again, it doesn't have to be much. It could be 2 locations with a few spots, but start it and then grow from there. That's kind of pretty much on our end what we're doing. I don't know if you have any questions or comments.
So how long have you been? You've been in Asbury for a while and in Jersey City. So can you just like walk us through either one, like and how process? And I see that you go out. We need to go out to bid. And then have you expanded in those communities, and how's that? You know, just give us a model example.
Sure. So Asbury Park, which is close here, it did go through a public bidding process, which we submitted, of course, the winning bid for. We started with one location.
This is in Asbury?
Asbury Park.
And how long ago was that?
We officially launched in September, so
okay.
4 or 5 months ago. And this first location was near City Hall, strategically there, obviously to be close. We launched it. The mayor said that it was the biggest turnout for his ribbon cutting that he ever had, so that was a nice launch event. And now what we're doing is we're adding the second phase, which is 2 additional locations, one by the Asbury Hotel, if you guys are familiar, and the other at Springwood Ave, which is a environmental justice community. So for us, it was very important to not only target communities where we see high utilization potential, but also to look at locations where we believe it will be important to have stations. And the environmental justice communities was a key part of the agreement with them that will also incorporate those locations. So those are the first 3 locations, and then the intention is to expand to up to 100 spots throughout the city of Asbury Park. So we will have installed by the end of probably Q1 or middle Q2 our first 16, and as demand grows, we'll expand it. Asbury Park, though, I must say, also will have a car sharing aspect to it. So we always say we're facilitating electric vehicle adoption, but we're also offering additional shared mobility solutions if needed or if the municipality wants. Asbury Park did want, and therefore we're also offering electric vehicle car sharing. So it was pretty straightforward with that, and that's kind of how it went through. So RFP, contract, and then
so like the expansion of the 2 additional locations in 4 or 5 months, was that in the original proposal, or what determines the expansion?
So let's say, for example, if we say up to 100 spots, it's obviously based on approval from the city. So the initial phase, we selected 3 locations, and we said we're going to do 3 locations with, I believe it was like up to 16 spots. We're going to do for the first phase 1, we called it. After the phase 1, we will reassess, see how it goes, and then together with the city, decide what are the subsequent locations going to be, where they're going to be, and how we're going to proceed. Because I think that's the best way. Just the industry is evolving very quickly, and there's a lot of unknowns. It wouldn't make sense for us to deploy 100 stations. As the technology changes, it adapts. So we always want to make sure that we're doing it in a way that is obviously future-proof, but obviously also in a way that is in line with the growth, and that we can always kind of be consistent with what's happening in the market. Which is why we don't, again, go 100 stations at once. We do location by location and slowly grow in conjunction with the city. So it has to kind of be, it's a partnership at the end of the day. And that's a big part of it.
And so in Jersey City, on a bigger scale, what did you do there? How did, in terms of growth, starting and expansion?
So Jersey City, we started with about 10 spots in it was all in a location. It was one block, very close to the PATH train. We started with 10, and then we grew it to about 19 spots in the same block. New Jersey, what we realized from that location was that, in Jersey City, is that having 19 spots in one block is too much. We would rather have less spots in more locations, because we realized that we need, people look at locations as it has to be more decentralized ultimately. So having such a central model, like the gas station model, is most likely not how electric vehicle charging is going to work. So we'd rather have about 8 spots in a location and not 19. That's kind of what we learned.
It should be known that in Jersey City, we went through an ordinance, not an RFP. So to your point earlier, it does not have to be through the RFP process. We have gone through license agreements in the past, ordinance like Jersey City, RFPs, of course. There are various ways that we can work with a city or municipality to install the stations.
I don't understand an ordinance or an RFP. Those are two unrelated things. So you'll have to explain to me what did you do in Jersey City that wasn't an RFP?
So Jersey City was an ordinance for, again, this was 4 years ago, almost 5 years ago. So it was an ordinance to give us exclusive use of those parking spots for 20 years.
How did they procure the contract with you?
There was a development that was coming in there, and that development had 0 parking requirements from the city, so it was kind of in conjunction with what that developer was doing. The developer said, hey, we're not putting these, we're not putting parking spots, so let's offer also charging on the curb. So we kind of did it in conjunction with that.
So it was part of the developer.
So we worked together with the developer in that case. In most cases, again, it does go through a procurement process. The RFP obviously leads to an agreement, right? So the RFP typically leads to sort of a concession agreement. In other states, so in Brookline, for example, we did not go through an RFP process. We got a license agreement. Columbus, Ohio, it went through RFP, but the second phase was going to be the license. So that's why I agree. The easiest and most kind of reliable way is RFP, but there are other ways too.
Is there a fee share? Is there profit sharing there?
So yes, we do. Typically, it's about 10% profit share with the municipality. If you kind of look at it for reference, the city bike model, where they have sponsors or ads, so that's another source of revenue that is able to be shared, and I think that gives a lot of upside. We always look at opportunity cost, right? What are you guys giving away and what are you getting? Opportunity cost is the spot. So on one hand, you can say, hey, we're giving up the revenue that we're getting from these parking spots. The response is, in certain cases, like Asbury Park, we're not, that meter is still there, meaning they're still charging for revenue for the spot for parking, and we're just charging for the electricity. So when you look at like the cost structure and the profit share, on one hand, you're not necessarily losing out on that revenue, and on the other hand, you're also gaining profit share from us from these programs.
So you've identified about a half a dozen spots in Long Branch. Is that done in conjunction with you, Rob? Is that?
That's correct. So they did their own analysis with the information that they obtained through their offices, and they then consulted with us, and we put our heads together with their data and our information in our office and came up with various different locations within the city. We can go over them quickly if you'd like. It's not black and white, meaning at the end of the day, if there was an agreement, the city would decide where they wanted these spaces and how many spaces. But these are just recommendations. And those locations, I know a couple of them, you can elaborate, but we're looking at the city lot behind the pharmacy on Broadway, the city lot next to the pharmacy on Brighton Avenue in West End, okay? The city lot behind the old Freddy's Pizzeria on Broadway as well. West Street, which that one's a little bit different. That's a public street that is part of the Transit Village Zone, which obviously there's a couple different projects being built on Willow Avenue in that area. There's the Butcher Block Restaurant, which is very successful. There's other restaurants in that area that are iconic restaurants that do very well on a regular basis. So we thought that would be a different location, but a unique location to put one in, maybe 1 or 2 spots there. And then feel free to elaborate on other locations.
Then also at this location, at City Hall on 3rd Avenue, adjacent to the train station. So the train station is owned by New Jersey Transit, but across the street those are public parking spots, so having people have to have access to charging there. Additionally, a library branch is the main location, correct? And I believe that's most of them with the city lots. We identified locations that we thought would have high utilization. We traditionally will target transit corridors, commercial zones, and residential areas. So when we start our pilot, we're looking at, as Michael said, decentralizing the locations where we put our charging stations. Then we collect data on utilization of these spots for 6 to 8 months, or however long that period of time is. And then based on that utilization and the locations that garner the highest utilization, we'll expand in that given location to other spots that are similar. In some locations, having more charging stations in commercial districts is better for a municipality. In other cases, it's not like that. But the expansion that we have is based on data. It's based on where we see stations having the highest utilization.
I have a question. Do you charge the municipalities for charging their vehicles?
So that's typically a separate arrangement based on the amount of vehicles, based on the frequency of charging. Some municipalities would rather have their own kind of charging depot in-house, meaning behind a fence that's only for them. So it doesn't also always have to be the smart charging. But if we're looking at a decentralized model, it could benefit municipal vehicles. And we'd have to speak, what's the cost of electricity, and that's kind of a separate agreement that we typically have. But of course, we would love for more vehicles from the municipal fleet to be electric, so we want to help with that.
So theoretically, where the municipality vehicles currently go to get service for gas, there theoretically could be a charging station there if the city had a fleet, regardless of size, of EV vehicles.
So when you say a pilot program, you would start, like, you would do a similar phase 1 where you would have 1 location with the anticipation of 2 others, like in the next 6 months or something? What did you have in mind?
Yeah, I would say 1 to 3 locations to start where we would identify, put them in, tested a lot of engagement with the community for those initial phases, meaning a lot of events, a lot of kind of community orientations, explaining what these stations are, really getting the local businesses and local communities involved, and then growing it. But the whole point is, while demand is still low, and unfortunately we only have 1 to 2% of vehicles that are electric now, so this is the perfect time to do these things, and then we grow it as demand grows, which is expected in upcoming years.
Are those, this may be a silly question, but are those units secure in any way? Like, I'm curious.
They're vandalism proof. They're paint resistant. So if somebody comes and spray paints it, it's not difficult to get off. They're also locked, so they're not difficult to get inside of. And oftentimes we'll put bollards in front of the station so that there's no issue with anybody bashing their car into it, let's say.
Have you had any experience with vandalism?
We've never had a problem with that.
Not
Yeah, through our research, the only example of that was in Jersey City in the municipal lot, which is a service provided by a different company. So the EV stations in their municipal lot are provided by a different company rather than Green Spot. They had a couple instances where folks were pulling the stations out, whether intentional or not, I don't know, but pulling them out harder than they're supposed to be. But they were fixed pretty quickly. That's the only research we came upon.
It could happen hypothetically, but we also sometimes put cameras if it's locations that we see high potential, and if there are issues, we rectify it. So it's our best interest to make sure that there aren't any issues, of course.
And we also found out, at the end of the day, if it's a program that a municipality wants to move forward with, it's prudent to make sure that the locations that are chosen are locations that have existing electric lines. You know, you don't wanna create electric lines to put the station there, you wanna do as well as, lighting. You know, you wanna put it in a location that has proper lighting and visibility.
So you guys would work directly with JCP&L, whoever the power company would be?
Yes, so yeah, we work with them now in Asbury Park, so I have a good relationship with them. So that's a key point though, to identify locations where we have the feasibility to bring in the electric power needed for the stations.
Okay. So what's the next step if we wanted to pursue that? How's this work?
I think it would either be going through that legal process, whether it is, or the procurement process, which is either issuing an RFP or going through a alternate pilot program, if that's something that is feasible from a legal perspective, and we're happy to involve our internal counsel to discuss. So it's, I think, one of those two routes, and then getting stations in, you know, it's a pretty quick process to install. It's just kind of getting the agreements in, and then we can really move forward quickly with JCP&L and so forth.
And I think if it's something that Long Branch wanted to move forward with, either this group or a subgroup of this group works with perhaps our office and the folks at Green Spot to nail down the exact locations and quantities of devices that the city would want to move forward with.
And it hasn't changed since you were last here in terms of the type of equipment. It would still be that sort of slow charge.
So we start with like the level 2, which is about 25 miles of range per hour. Those are AC chargers. We then, typically for the future phases, we will put in direct current fast charging. We just installed our first DC fast chargers in Columbus last week, so we're starting to incorporate them into our model. It's just about, in New Jersey right now, it just doesn't make sense financially. Once there are additional incentives that come in that kind of encourage fast charging, we'd be the first to put them in. So as long as we're here, the second that it's feasible and the state is encouraging, which we hope will be soon based on our conversations with NJDEP, then those will come in too.
So what's the average charge take right now for an average car?
So for level 2 charging, it's about 25 miles of range per hour. So for a full charge of about, let's say, 200 miles, it's 8 hours. We don't anticipate that people, based on our data as well, will charge for 8 hours. It's oftentimes to top off. It's oftentimes is as part of their daily routine, right? The level 2 charging. DC fast charging, which again will become more prevalent as, I would say, in the upcoming 2 years or so, that will charge about 80% of a battery in about 30 minutes. So those are kind of the chargers that you'll see. Those 50 kilowatt chargers are the ones that we'll probably see more in the municipal locations, not the extreme fast chargers. Those will be like on highways. But the 50 kilowatt chargers, those are the ones that we'll probably see more and more. And those will be kind of strategically placed in areas where people go for a shorter amount of time, maybe near cafes, near rest stops, in areas like that. But again, that's something we always have to be conscientious of, like, what are people doing while they're charging? If you're going to a restaurant while they're charging, that it'll be 1.5 to 2 hours that you're at the restaurant, let's say for dinner, great, you'll get about 50, 60 miles of range, wonderful. And what we're also doing is incorporating local businesses into the whole charging mechanism. So let's say you're charging now, and you have a local restaurant. While you're charging, you show them that you're charging, you'll get a 10% discount at the restaurant. So things like that, where we're kind of incorporating the local community and local businesses with the whole charging aspect. It's a big part of it, we believe.
Sustainable Jersey credit out of this?
Correct.
Okay. The Green Team knows, are they on board with this? It's been discussed with them?
We haven't had an in-depth discussion about it, but it's part of the Sustainable Jersey platform.
I believe you get about 10 points when you install a charging station.
And for the 25-mile charge, what's the cost of that to the consumer? I'm just curious.
So for about an hour, it's again dependent on electricity prices. In New Jersey, you have to charge by the hour. You can't charge by kilowatt. So we charge about $1.50 to $2 for an hour, depending on whether or not we're incorporating parking fees or not. If it's no parking, then it's less. So I'd say between $1 to $2.
And most of the time when folks purchase EV vehicles, either through the vehicle manufacturer or outside of it, there are apps that a lot of these individuals upload on their phones, on their smartphones, which indicate where EV stations are located. So, they go to a place for vacation or they're shopping or what have you, and they see that, Long Branch has 4 locations or 8 locations or where they're actually located.
It's not even on your phone, it automatically comes on the screen of the car. My sister just has one.
It's in the Tesla.
Yeah, it's in the Tesla, yeah. It automatically pops up where to go to charge and everything.
eventually it'll be incorporated more into day-to-day lives. So I think Longbridge doesn't have. We just did some research. How many did we see?
I don't believe you guys have any. I think there are
In
probably
West-
some in private developments and the apartment buildings, but publicly available.
We didn't see
there's
anything
zero.
on
Yeah,
that.
the closest ones that pop up is at the outlets in Neptune. I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's one station also on the Monmouth University campus in one of their parking lots. That's not their green spot. That's actually been there for a while. But you're right. Publicly, there aren't any in the town of Longbridge.
But the one at Monmouth University is a lot smaller than the one I'm seeing now.
So this one up here, this is the DC fast charger that Michael was talking about that we installed last week. So DC fast chargers are inherently a little bit bigger because they're delivering more power. This happens to be a larger model.
Yeah, I don't know if you can see that.
That's the.
They're,
But that's basically the station.
if you have, I'm not sure if you guys have the packets in front of you, but it's on about a 2x2 concrete pedestal. Slab. So they're fairly slim. You can easily walk past on a sidewalk without bumping into it. They're not large.
And the design is important. So in Columbus, we collaborated with a local arts college, and they made this like cool design. So that's also another point. So we put in the stations. We can collaborate with the local community to bring in like cool designs that kind of really represent the city of Long Branch, and so that's another part that we are also working on in Asbury Park, and I think could be cool here too.
They're going to be designing a wrap on the junction box, so the box that holds essentially like the power to deliver the power. Right now it's just green. It's pretty boring, but they're going to be painting it, probably writing Asbury Park on it or something.
Are the rates to consumers regulated at all, or is it's a free for all, you do everything?
For now, the BPU does not regulate the
So I'm just
rates.
curious, like when you started in Jersey City, what was the rate per hour and what is it now?
We've kept it. I mean, honestly, it's there has not been mass utilization. So we have a little bit of a margin, but it's not. My shareholders we understand that it'll take time. So right now we're just trying to get utilization for the station and to look at our electricity rate. So a lot of times the demand charges are a very challenging part. So our price per kilowatt hour can fluctuate drastically, and of course we don't want to have to pass over that cost to the consumer. So we're always trying to mitigate our cost per kilowatt hour from the utility because we pay that bill, and we'll always try and offer the best rate for the consumer because the consumer will have choice. You'll be able to charge at home. You'll be able to charge at a different location. So we have to be competitive with that. And so our cost must represent what the market has. And then on top of that, we also need to make sure that people, like at night, right? At night, charging typically costs less. The electricity costs, there's less charge per kilowatt hour. So in that case, we want to encourage people to charge at night so we can reduce the rates based on the time of the day that people are charging. So you can say, hey, at night, and this is what we're doing in Asbury Park, and between 9 p.m. and maybe 8 a.m., we drop the rates to minimal so that people can charge overnight. We don't expect someone to charge for 2 hours and then have to move their car at 3 a.m., right? So that's something that we do to be conscientious of the rates that we have and to kind of look at supply and demand accordingly. And on the flip side, we also don't want people to hog stations, quote unquote. Right? We don't want someone to stay between prime hours, 8 a.m. till let's say 12 p.m. and stay even though they're plugged in, but no electricity is coming out. We want to encourage turnover during the day. So in that case, we can up the charge after let's say 3 hours. So first 3 hours, the cost is X. Second 3 hours, the cost is escalated to X times 1.5, and so forth. And those are ways we can kind of play around with that demand versus the supply as we grow. And if we see, hey, there's extreme demand in a location, then that's signs that we have to expand and add more stations. That's kind of how it goes from a
I have
canonical
another
perspective.
question, I don't know, but are any of the charging stations powered by solar power?
So in New Jersey, none of ours are. In Newton, Massachusetts, our program, the utility is working with us and they are adding solar panels. They help, but honestly not much yet. It's not as efficient as it should be where we hope it'll go. But those types of things like energy storage, shaving peak demand, are kind of decentralizing and not having to rely only on the utility for power. big things that we're working on. From an economical perspective, it's just, we're not there yet. It's not feasible. But those are programs in Israel. We're doing a pilot with that, so we're working on those technologies to bring. So more to come on that.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Item 2, Chief Roebuck. Good evening. Good evening.
Going back, we had a request, in the middle of last year, McClellan Street and Grand Avenue over North Long Branch off of Route 36. So as people are coming down eastbound of Route 36, they're using Grand Avenue as a cut through. A lot of residents have complained. We have a letter or two here from them. So 36 being a state road, we had to apply to the state to be able to try to help them out. What they and we came up with together was a left turn prohibition if you're coming down Route 36 eastbound from West Long Branch. That first left when you come into town past the car wash and the storage place is Grand Avenue. And they agreed they're willing to do a left turn prohibition between the hours of 8 a.m. and 10 a.m. and then 4:30 p.m. and 6:30 p.m. 7 days a week. To go forward with this, they just need you to pass a resolution supporting it and putting it into our ordinance, and then they'll go ahead and put up the signs and make the changes if that's something that you want to.
So in other words, if you're coming down 36, you can't make a left on the,
Can't make a left onto Grand Avenue, only between the prohibited times. So,
okay,
so we'll have the signs up that'll have the
okay.
times. I'm sure you've seen them other places where it says no left turn between these hours.
I know it's tough from when you come from Grand Avenue to make a left into 36 and not to.
Yeah, it's up there too.
It's
Yeah.
tough. They've
Plus
also
it-
experienced it the
Plus,
other day.
everybody's coming down 36. You kind of have that blind curve there. Then you have
Yeah.
someone stopped in the middle of the road trying to make the left, and the traffic's coming. It's not a great area for it. So, and the times that they want to do it is probably the heaviest time.
The
where-
heaviest
where,
times,
you know,
yeah.
there's a lot of traffic there. So, that's what our guys took a look at it. That's what they offered the state. This goes back to July of 2019 when we first started getting this letters from the people in the neighborhood. It just took them till December to actually get this back to us. So if you want to do the resolution, we will move forward with it and put the resolution on and have them put the signs up as soon as it's.
Also, since you're speaking of that area,
Mm-hmm.
on July Avenue and Branchport, when you wanna make a right, and you
Mhm.
can't make a right on red,
Mm-hmm.
that sign is all the way to the right. I actually got stopped one time because I never saw it. And it's not very visible when you're at that, unless you really know that you can't make a right on red there. If you see it, it's kind of to the right, it's not in front of you, it's over to the side.
Coming eastbound again.
I'm going down Branchport Avenue, I'm gonna make a right onto July.
Going down Branchport Avenue, make the right onto July.
I'm on July, I'm sorry, I'm on Branchport Avenue.
Right.
I come to July Avenue, and I wanna make a right.
To go to West Long Branch or to go to?
Yes, to go to West Long Branch.
So right by the gas station.
Yeah.
So that's actually our road. That's not the state road. So it's right on Branchport.
So you come from Casa
It's
Comida.
not on Branchport, the sign is on July Avenue, near where the liquor store is, it's like right near there,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. I
Um,
will, if it's a state road, they're gonna have to do that and fix that. If it's a Branchport Avenue sign, we'll take care of it, but I'll send the guys out there to
Yeah,
take a look and see what we can do. Right on red sign is not visible, you said?
Not really,
Okay. Yeah, we can take a look at that for you.
thank you.
Okay. Still trying to visualize great. When I'm coming down 36,
Mm-hmm.
the first street after the car wash, that's Grand Avenue,
Yes, sir.
and you can't make a left?
We won't be making a left, yeah. We won't be making a left there between 8 a.m. and 10 a.m. and 4:30 and 6 p.m. because people try to miss the light down there, the light that comes up. So they take the left on the Grand and they take the right onto McClellan. They speed down there and then they go on to Branchport, and that's what the
Oh,
residents were.
And I got you. Okay.
complaining about that people were speeding, and they said the streets narrow, there's parking on both sides of the street, so they'd like to at least cut down some of the traffic on that street during those times.
What about, looking into making, like, eliminating some of the parking on that, cause I've gone down there and it's very, very tight.
It is very narrow, we have parking on both sides of the street.
Yeah.
You know, there are some houses there that don't have any spots to park there because the houses are pretty close. I don't know if you wanna go
Mhm.
start eliminating the parking spots. Something we could look into, but
Mhm. Yeah, I just know
it
it's
is,
very tight there.
it is pretty tight there. Yeah, it's a pretty narrow street.
Mhm.
So if everybody's good, we'll come back with the resolution.
Were the timeframes the request of the city, or was that a state idea, if you know?
I don't know, it came back on their letterhead with the times, so that's the times that they're willing to do. They came out and looked at it also, so I'm sure they did a traffic study about when was the highest rate of traffic when they were gonna do it, but that's what came back. And, so they just need this resolution to be able to move forward in that process.
Okay?
Yeah,
Okay?
And we'll send it to you, Mr. Reno?
Yes, please, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Item 3, review of the regular meeting agenda.
I'm good with it.
Okay. I need a motion to close.
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Need a motion to adopt a resolution to go into executive session for the following items: contract negotiations, Ocean Gate, Blue Reno, Broadway, Blue Reno, and Chandler and Mass, Mr. Jackson.
So move.
Second.
There's also attorney-client privilege,
Oh, no, item 2 is attorney-client privilege.
personnel matters for the sewage authority.
Oh, that was later on. Okay, personnel matters. Sewage authority.
So move.
Second.
Mr.
Yeah.
Viera?
Yes.
Mrs. Wittes?
Yes.
Dr. Selly? Dr. Selly? Mr. Dangler?
Yes.
Okay.
So Kevin McManaman should be here shortly, but we can start, I guess we're gonna start with Ocean Gate. So